This is a CBC podcast.
In this first half hour of the program, it's the start of earnings season, and investors are expecting some pretty robust numbers. Ardana Guzik will be here with that and what we might expect when the Bank of Canada releases its latest interest rate decisions. As well, and completely differently, is it safe for dogs to stick their heads out of car windows? CBC's Blair Sanderson has the answer as he explores what drives them to do it in the first place. Let's start at our Daybreak News Desk in Prince George with Bill Fee.
Good morning, Carolina. As hundreds of wildfires continue to burn across BC, many have been forced to leave their homes and communities, and anxiety levels are also high for many as they remember previous wildfire seasons. And Valemount residents are having a tough time keeping the cupboards stocked. Reports of empty shelves at the only grocery store in town are forcing some to travel hours away in order to get supplies.
Thanks very much, Bill. So far this morning, let's go to the Valemount area in the Robson Valley. So far it looks this morning like it's about 9 degrees there. Prince George, sunny and 7. In Prince Rupert, a mainly sunny morning, 11 degrees at the airport. And right now in the Fort St. John area, in the Peace, sunny at the airport, right now 10 degrees. How are things looking for the rest of the day?
Local smoke is pretty much in the forecast right across northern BC today. Another very warm day ahead as well. Across Prince George, the North Caribou, and the Robson Valley, expect highs near 30 with sun and smoke. Sun and cloud for the Lakes District and Smithers, highs to 27. Across the Peace and Fort Nelson, local smoke in the region with sun and a high of 26. For the Northwest, a cloudy day. At Dease Lake and the coastal inland sections, expect highs near 22. A chance of showers near the water, highs to 18. And for the Bella Coola Valley, mainly sunny, highs near 29.
Thanks very much, Bill. Right now it is 6:12 and Stephen Bull is at our Daybreak Sports Desk. Good morning, Stephen.
Good morning.
So yesterday I was out gardening and I could hear from coming inside my husband and daughter cheering and screaming for the European soccer champions. She was one of the fans of Italy. He was betting on England. Tell us what happened.
Oh, right in the middle. I was also stuck in the middle. I have a neighbor on one side, an Italian family on the other side, an English fella moved to Canada not too long ago, so I had to stay neutral in between. I told them I was cheering for the referees and sportsmanship. But Italy took it, their first European title since 1968. It started off, though, in favor of the English, Luke Shaw scoring the fastest ever goal in the Euro final just 2 minutes in, but it would go to extra time. That didn't solve anything, so then we were down to penalty kicks, and Italy took it 3-2. There's a lot of talk ahead of this about it, quote, coming back home, a trophy coming back to England where international association football all began. And afterwards, Leonardo Bonucci, who scored the tying goal, had a little bit of fun with that. Listen to him speaking through a translator.
We'd heard it day in, day out ever since Wednesday night after the Denmark game that the Cup would be coming home to London. Sorry for them, but actually the Cup will be taking a nice flight. It'll be winging its way to Rome, and that way Italians all over the world can really savour this competition.
So there you go. Instead of going back home, it's going back to Rome. The English had their best finish at the Euro Championship ever. The previous best was a third place, but was not good enough. And an ugly turn from some of the fans, turning to racist attacks on the black players that did not score in penalty kicks. And it got so bad that the Football Association, England's governing body for the sport, released a statement that read, in part, anyone behind such disgusting behavior is not welcome in following the team, and called on the government to act quickly to introduce legislation so that there would be real-life consequences to social media attacks. Also worth noting, there was another major international soccer trophy, the Copa America. That went to Argentina after they beat Brazil 1-0. And Argentinian Lionel Messi, if you can believe it, won his first ever major international title, which is shocking despite his dominance on the club level.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, let's talk tennis next. Not so dominant at Wimbledon, a Canadian playing in his first ever semifinal, but it didn't go anywhere as well as planned, did it?
No, Denis Shapovalov looking good, feeling confident, up against the world number one, Novak Djokovic. And in the end, it would be Djokovic who would take it in straight sets. Shapovalov kept it close, but it wasn't close enough for wins. Djokovic would go on to win everything. It'd be his 20th Grand Slam title, and that would tie the record with Federer and Nadal. On the women's side, Ash Barty, the first Australian woman in 40 years to win the Wimbledon title. The last one was Yvonne Goolagong. And Barty, who is Indigenous, spoke after the match about the importance of having Indigenous role models like Goolagong.
Yvonne is a very special person in my life. I think she has been iconic in paving a way for young Indigenous youth to believe in their dreams and to chase their dreams. And she's just been an icon for years and years, and not just on the tennis court. Her legacy off the court is incredible, and I think if I could be half the person that Yvonne is, I'd be a very, very happy person.
Barty was the junior Wimbledon champ a decade ago. Shapovalov was the junior champ in 2016, so maybe that means in just a couple years he'll win it all? We'll see.
Let's hope. Hey, you're so good at doing rapid fire, and I know it was a really busy weekend in sports. Can you give us a rapid fire run through of the headlines we should know?
Sure. Start the clock. We'll start with beach volleyball. Canada's Sarah Pavin and Melissa Humana Paredes, the reigning world champs of beach volleyball, had to settle for bronze in their final event pre-Olympics, but hopefully they can use that as motivation. In golf, we were following Stephen Ames last week, who after the first round at the U.S. Senior Open was tied for first. He would end up finish tied for eighth, but another Canadian, Mike Weir, would finish tied for second. In basketball, the FIBA Under-19 World Cup happened, and Canada finished third, beating Serbia 101-92. It's Canada's just second ever medal at that tournament. And finally, the baseball All-Star break has begun, and heading into it, the Blue Jays with a 3-1 win. They almost had a no-hitter, 7 innings of a no-hitter, but gave it up. But a win's more important than a no-hitter.
Sure, let's say that. Stephen, thanks very much. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. That's Stephen Bull at our Daybreak Sports Desk. It is coming up now to 22 minutes past 6 o'clock. Thanks for listening with us this Monday morning. Summer's well underway, and that means Canadians are hitting the road for a vacation, and with them often comes the family dog. And that got CBC's Blair Sanderson wondering why dogs seem to enjoy sticking their heads out of car windows. Do they love the sensation of the wind blowing through their fur, or is something else going on? He talked to a few canine experts to find out.
Hello. That's Gracie saying hello.
This is Gracie?
Yes.
Hi, Gracie.
It's walk time for Gracie and Finn, a golden doodle and lab retriever whose owners let them ride in the back seat of the car on the way to the park.
Yeah, no judgment on the state of the car.
There's so much dog hair.
There is, yeah.
It's hard to keep up with.
And while their dogs are in the car, Calvin and Marlissa de Groot say the dogs also get the most scenic views possible.
Sticks her head out the window the entire drive. She loves the feeling of the wind, I think, on her face.
I think she likes the sensation because it's kind of like a little ticklish, and it's almost like she's getting petted.
These are fine theories, and they could be right. But to better understand this phenomenon, it helps to know how a dog sees the world, or smells it. Suzanne McDonald is a professor at York University who studies animal behavior.
Dogs live in a wonderful world of smell that we cannot even imagine as a human. Our puny human brains are very visual, where they can smell just everything, and everything has different intensities of smell. And so I think when they stick their noses out the window, they are having a heck of a good time.
McDonald says she often notices dogs even tilting their heads up a bit so their noses can better catch the wind. It's like they're flooding their most powerful sense with a fire hose of stimulation.
It's got to be literally a rush.
Julia Espinoza is a PhD candidate at the University of Toronto, whose focus is canine cognition. She says dogs might also like sticking their heads out of car windows because they're trying to figure out where they're going.
I wouldn't be surprised if they are able to recognize different types of areas they're passing through simply by the scent, especially if you go on a road trip across Ontario like I did up to my cottage just a little bit ago. Every time we passed through farmland, I could see my dog's nose in the back sort of waving around, and that was even without the window open.
On top of that, Espinoza says it could be that the dogs just find it fun. much in the same way we might. After all, you need to tell children not to stick their heads and arms out of windows. And when adults want fun, they buy convertibles. On YouTube, there are countless videos of people amused by dogs in the wind. It's the same for dog owner Calvin DeGroot.
Everyone laughs everywhere we drive. People just laugh at us because her head's sticking out the window. She's got really long curly hair, so it blows in the wind, and it's pretty funny.
But it's no laughing matter if a dog gets hurt. Julia Espinoza says debris in the air, often kicked up by other vehicles, can get into a dog's eyes, causing serious damage. There's also concern from some experts about ear infections. And since dogs aren't great with seatbelts, there's also the chance they'll simply fall right out of the car. And that's why Professor Suzanne McDonald says a good compromise is to just crack the window a little bit. After all, if dogs experience the world mostly through their nose, that should be enough to keep them happy.
It's like a new world of smell out there. It's like a smell buffet. The world is a smell buffet for dogs, and that's a great way to experience that buffet is to stick your nose out, and they are loving every minute of it.
And that way they'll arrive at their destination in one piece, ready to sniff out their next adventure. For CBC Radio, I'm Blair Sanderson.
Hubble Homestead will open for entertaining, affordable, and low-risk activities in the fresh air and open space of the turn-of-the-century historic site. Good old-fashioned fun is timeless, and Hubble Homestead has a schedule of public programming to keep you busy all summer long. Explore our region's rich history with daily self-led activities and personal guided tours. Book a spot to participate in heritage demonstrations. Stop into the general store for your favorite candy and to browse our wide selection of locally made goods. And buy lunch at the barbecue or bring your own and enjoy a picnic in the park. Open daily from 10 o'clock to 5 o'clock, the historic site is located 40 kilometers north of Prince George, just off Highway 97 on Mitchell Road. For more information on upcoming activities and safety measures, visit hubblehomestead.ca or call 250-564-7033.
Thanks very much for the invitation. If you have a community event or public service announcement, simply call us on the listener line. Leave a message there. We'll do the rest. 1-866-340-1932. It is 6:22 here on Daybreak, and turning now to business news. This week may set the tone for what is expected to be a very strong earnings season. In fact, analysts are referring to the latest quarter as peak earnings. Donna Guzik is here to explain all that and what we can expect on Wednesday when the Bank of Canada releases its latest interest rate decision. Donna, good morning.
Good morning.
What are you expecting to hear from the Bank of Canada this week?
Well, we're going to get a lot of information on Wednesday. We've got the overnight lending rate, which is not expected to move at all. It's still at 0.25%. And then we're going to get the quarterly monetary policy report, and we're going to get a press conference with Governor Mecklen. So lots to chew on. Economists are expecting to hear the bank will reduce its weekly bond buying program by another $1 billion a week, down to $2 billion. So back in April, they reduced it from $4 billion to $3 billion. Now they're expecting to pull it down to $2 billion, which means that they're putting less liquidity into the market to prop it up via the bond market to keep rates low. So that's two of the tools that they use to keep rates low. One is the overnight lending rate. The other is buying up bonds to boost the bond prices, which pushes the yields down, and that affects some of their borrowing costs. So the need to reduce the liquidity really does signify the bank sees growth, economic growth happening. So the quarterly monetary policy report gives us way more information on the bank's thinking of where things are going. So the last report was in April. Are they going to revise their growth forecast, for instance, and where they see inflation headed and what they see as risks to growth, for instance, and talk about the labor market as well. And so we'll watch for that. Of course, you know, what everybody always wants to know is any kind of hints as to when they're going to hike the overnight lending rate. And still, that's expected to stay where it is for a while yet. In fact, economists are not seeing any hike until 2023. So, you know, we'll see how optimistic the central bank is with regards to where the economy is going. You know, the vaccinations have ramped up. We've got some more openings, et cetera. So the central bank could really signal some more optimism that they've been saying. So we'll find out Wednesday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern, rate announcement, monetary policy report, press conference following. I'd watch the Canadian dollar reaction to that, all of that. So that's going to be interesting to see what happens with the currency on that report. So Wednesday morning, that's when the party starts.
And can you give us a sense, Donna, how strong will the latest earnings seasons look?
Yeah, this is interesting. So this is fiscal second quarter. Analysts are calling it peak earnings because basically they're saying after this quarter, it's not going to be as strong. So they're really looking at last year's second quarter to this year's second quarter. And look what happened last year. I mean, we're more shutdowns this second quarter, more openings. So analysts expect for the S&P 500 companies, the broader market, that profits will be up 65% compared to a year ago, which is huge. But then you got to look at where we were a year ago. So that's a nice number to look at, and it's very optimistic. And certainly earnings and the potential for future earnings are what drives stock prices. And we've seen the indexes in North America at record highs, some saying it's overvalued, others saying there's still room to move. So, we'll see not only what they say about their current quarter, but what are they going to say about what they expect for future quarters in terms of their growth. And that's what really will drive a lot of the stock prices this week. So we've got the big banks reporting in the States, JP Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Citigroup, Wells Fargo. Delta Airlines also is out this week. That'll be interesting to see what they say about their hopes for future air travel as people are starting to travel more. Alcoa, a steel company, PepsiCo is out as well. Kansas City Southern comes out Friday with their numbers. I mentioned them because that's the rail company that CP and CN Rail want to buy, but CN Rail is waiting for some kind of approval first because they outbid CP. So we'll see what they say about that. And if they say anything about the fact that President Biden recently signed an executive order to limit concentration of ownership, the Biden administration wants to see fewer companies owning everything, and increase competition. So we'll see if they say anything about that. Meanwhile, Canada tends to lag in terms of reporting earnings, but we have Cogeco coming out on Wednesday for their fiscal third quarter.
What else are you watching for this week, Donna?
Oil prices, because OPEC Plus still has not come to any kind of an agreement on when to start releasing some more oil onto the market because of expected demand growth. But we have oil down this morning over 1%, both in London and New York. So keep an eye on that one. We'll see if that continues to edge lower or if that's going to be all over the place this week and see how that might be reflected on the pumps. The U.S. Fed Chair Jerome Powell speaks before Congress Wednesday, Thursday. That's always going to be something to listen to as well. An update on that G20 finance ministers and central bank meeting over the weekend in Venice ending. They have endorsed that plan to impose a minimum 15% corporate tax on the biggest companies around the world. So the next move is to give it a final blessing at the October summit in Rome. There's a few holdouts, but 132 countries have agreed. Could be tough to pass for all the countries, including the U.S. The U.S. Congress could be a sticking point. A lot of anger about even the idea of raising corporate taxes. So anyways, they want to see it implemented in 2023 overall. But the fact that you've got so many countries on board wanting to impose at least a minimum tax on these large companies who have been managing to skirt a lot of taxes by going to tax havens. So that's an ongoing story.
Thank you, Donna.
You're welcome.
That's our business columnist, Donna Guzik. Taking a look at the numbers, the Friday market, the TSX closed up 196 points, the Dow up 448 points, the Canadian dollar closed up 0.52 of a cent to 80.31 cents US. This morning it is at 80.04, so down 0.34 of a cent. Light sweet crude closed up $1.71 to 74.65 a barrel, down close to $1 this morning, down 99 cents, trading at 73.57. Western Canada Select closed up $1.72 to 61.84. Natural gas up less than a cent to $3.69. We're coming up to the 6:30 Daybreak News here on CBC Radio 1. Coming up next, the province making it harder for landlords to rent-evict tenants. We'll have the details on that at 6:45. Plus, if your boss wants people back in the office, they'll have to be prepared to answer some tough questions about vaccines. We'll talk about whether workplaces can make vaccines mandatory for their employees. That's coming up after your Daybreak News.
This is CBC News from Prince George. It is 7 degrees in Prince George, 11 in Prince Rupert, and 10 degrees this hour in Fort St. John. Good morning, I'm Bill Fee. The Regional District of Bulkley-Nechako has issued 2 more evacuation alerts due to wildfires. The Camsill Lake fire is burning west of Stewart Lake and listed at 20 hectares right now, but out of control. A member of the Yakuchi and the Claston reserves are impacted by that alert. The Grizzly Lake fire southwest of Vanderhoof is also out of control and estimated at 500 hectares. There was some good news on the wildfire front over the weekend. The Northwest Fire Centre says the Bulkley Lake fire is now being held. The Regional District of Bulkley-Nechako and the Wet'suwet'en Band Council have rescinded an evacuation order for that fire. An evacuation alert, though, does remain in place. The Cutoff Creek fire continues to grow, spreading to over 10,000 hectares over the weekend. Jerry Thiessen of the Bulkley Valley Regional District says the winds this weekend were concerning, but he's hopeful that cooling temperatures will help that situation.
We're hoping that the next couple of days will be good to us and maybe get some precipitation come Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
The Cutoff Creek is not currently threatening homes or transportation links. The Regional District of Bulkley-Nechako is encouraging people to be prepared and to stay updated. As hundreds of wildfires continue to burn across BC, many have been forced to leave their homes and their communities. And as Joel Ballard reports, anxiety levels are also high for many during this wildfire season.
It's hard not to get into the panic mindset.
Deb McDougall lives on a ranch with her husband and animals, not far from Sun Peaks Resort. The nearby Embleton Mountain fire has forced the evacuation of many properties, but not McDougall's. She's packed anyways.
Just in case, we had seconds to get up and out, and I would take all the dogs and open the gates and hope the horses and cows made out okay. And you just have to kind of take what you can and just get out.
Anxiety is high. It's a reality people living in many parts of British Columbia face yearly. Margot Wagner is the chair of the Cariboo Regional District.
Every time there's this little spiral of smoke that comes up from a lightning hit, it's a trigger.
On Sunday, Wagner issued more evacuation alerts for communities around Canham Lake, and Wagner herself hasn't unpacked her go bag since 2017.
It's in my car again now.
Because when an order comes in, you might only have minutes to leave. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Vancouver.
BC wildfire crews encountered some unexpected issues over the weekend. Crews on 2 of the 60 fires they were working on were grounded because of drones. It's illegal to operate a drone within 5 nautical miles of a wildfire in this province. Anyone caught doing so could face a fine of up to $100,000, jail for up to a year, or both. Noella Kakula speaks for the BC Wildfire Service.
In Vernon, we had to shut down operations on the fire right in Vernon there for 2 hours due to a drone incident. So please keep your drones off our wildfires because it has significant impact to firefighting efforts.
The Wildfire Service says boats were also an issue yesterday. Recreational boaters at Kalamalka Lake impeded the work of skimmers working in the Okanagan. The Tk'emlúps te Secwépemc First Nation will release a report this week on the discovery of buried remains at a former residential school. The BC First Nation sparked a national reckoning in May when it announced the preliminary discovery of the remains of an estimated 215 children. Eva Yuguen-Senge has more.
Nearly 2 months ago, the Tk'emlúps te Secwépemc First Nation kick-started a national conversation about Canada's dark history of residential schools. The nation announced ground-penetrating radar scans had uncovered the remains of 215 children buried at the site of the former Kamloops residential school. Chief Roseanne Casimir said the findings were preliminary and that more details would be provided in a full report, including from the specialist who performed the ground radar work. The findings inspired many other Indigenous communities to seek out the technology themselves and have renewed long-standing calls for justice for survivors of residential schools. To Kamloops Tishkwepmik will release the report at an online event Thursday morning. It will include next steps for the First Nation and statements from survivors of the Kamloops Residential School. Eva Gwen-Sanj, CBC News, Vancouver.
Residents of Valemount in the Robson Valley are struggling to keep their pantries stocked. Reports of empty shelves and rancid meat at the only grocery store in town are forcing some to travel as far as 3 hours for supplies. The CBC's Kate Partridge explains.
Valemount resident Shaylin Carlson says the only grocery store in town has been having supply issues for months. Residents report feeling the meat in the coolers at room temperature, and often the shelves are bare.
I just feel like it's been handled inappropriately and is pretty worrisome for folks that really rely on it.
Carlson says the situation has reached a crisis point in the past month. Then on Sunday, the store closed its doors for repairs without warning. Residents Meg Aspey and Steph McDonald are concerned for those without a means of transportation.
Driving 45 minutes is a minor inconvenience, but there are many members of our community that don't have that ability.
Valemount Mayor Owen Torgerson says council is aware of the situation and is trying to find a solution.
Having a conversation with the ownership, we both agreed that a speedy remedy is required.
CBC contacted the store's manager, who would only confirm the store has closed and could not provide a reopening date. Kate Partridge, CBC News, Prince George.
It is 6:35. That is the CBC News.
Thank you very much, Bill Fee at our Daybreak News Desk. I'm Carolina DeReich, and this is Daybreak for Monday, July 12th. Glad you can join us this morning. Ahead in this half hour of the program, new rules from the province could make unjustified rent evictions a thing of the past. We'll find out what the new rules are and what they will mean for tenants in about 10 minutes' time. But first, when it comes to providing a safe work environment, how will vaccinations factor into workplace policies? Up next, an employment lawyer weighs in on the complicated legal issues bosses will have to navigate. But first, Bill, how are things looking out there?
A couple of little details on the road to tell you about. Highway 29 will be closed in both directions later on today for vehicle recovery. That's 10 to noon between Watson Road and Donis Road in the Charlie Lake area. Wildfire activity has still closed access to Monkman Provincial Park. That's 60 kilometers south of Tumbler Ridge. The marine report today, winds to 15 knots, seas to 2 meters. No BC Ferries delays to tell you about. Still status quo with the Northern Adventure operating on a modified schedule right now as the Northern Expedition gets repairs. And for Hydro, no outages being reported across the north this morning.
Last week we were talking about summer reads, Bill, and you were mentioning that you were reading Eden Robinson's Trickster trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
How's it going? Still loving it?
Still loving it. I've made it through the first one, and I'm just biding my time before I start the second. So, yeah.
Sometimes it's good to let those books sit for just a little while.
Just a little wee bit, but I might just have to crack it open.
Yeah. Well, if you're looking for a diverse selection of reading, go to our Facebook page, Bill. Last week, we asked listeners to share their summer reads with us for our Snapbook contest, and I count at least 26 suggestions so far of quite an array of books. So you can check that out on our Facebook page. We're at Daybreak North, and then post a photo of some of the books you're reading this summer as well for a chance to win a Daybreak mug on Friday. We should take a look at the temperatures as well. Pretty good temperatures, I would say, for reading a book, especially if it's smoky where you are. There are special air quality statements in effect for the Caribou and the Prince George area. So far at the Prince George Airport, it's sunny and 7. Quesnel, 9 degrees this morning. Prince Rupert at the airport, it's a bit cloudy here in the downtown, but mainly sunny right now at the airport and 11 degrees. Haida Gwaii, 11 degrees as well, mostly cloudy. On the Central Coast, cloudy and 11. Sunny and 12 in the Bella Coola area. At the airport between Terrace and Kitimat, mostly cloudy and 12. Stewart, mostly cloudy and 11 degrees. As we move east into the Bulkley Valley, Smithers, right now 9 degrees. Burns Lake, a pretty cool start. 4 degrees this morning. Fort St. James and Mackenzie, right now 9 degrees. And in the Peace, sunny and 10 in the Fort St. John area. Sunny and 9 in Dawson Creek. 11 degrees under mostly cloudy skies in Chetwynd. Fort Nelson, mostly cloudy and 12. And in Dease Lake, it's a mostly cloudy morning, right now sitting at 8 degrees.
I'm Amy D'Angelo from the Prince George Public Library, and you're listening to CBC Radio 1 at 91.5 FM.
Thanks, Amy. It's coming up to 20 minutes now before 7 o'clock here on the program. You're listening to us as well in Chetwynd, 93.5 FM, Barkerville, 540 AM, and in Kispiox, 91.3 FM. Well, employers could be faced with new legal challenges as they consider what their policy should be towards vaccinations. And whether or not they choose to get vaccinated, employees will have plenty of questions before they return to work as well. To help navigate a few issues, we are joined this morning by lawyer Jessica Greenwood. She's the lead litigator at Spring Law, which advises on workplace legal issues. Jessica, good morning.
Good morning, Carolina. Thanks for having me.
What are some of the primary concerns you've heard from clients on this issue?
What I'm hearing from employer clients is that this is a real balancing act. It's balancing keeping your operations of your business running and keeping all of your staff safe as employers are required to do, and balancing that against the individual employees' rights and what they may want.
So as people head back to the office, will employers have the right to make vaccinations mandatory?
They don't have a blanket right to require this because always there has to be some accommodation and some exceptions, but employers are allowed to assess the risks in their own workplace, and because Occupational Health and Safety Act type legislation requires employers keep employees safe, they can make a vaccination policy, and that may mean that they require that employees be vaccinated. But if an employee cannot be vaccinated, either because they have a medical condition or a religious reason, then the employer would be required to accommodate that.
I want to talk a little bit more about that with some of those complicating factors. If someone is unable to get that vaccination, what legal rights do they have?
So under the human rights legislation, that would be a condition that requires accommodation. So if you had a medical reason or a religious belief that meant that you did not want to get the vaccine, you could assert that to your employer, and the employer would be required to accommodate that up to the point of undue hardship. And so what that might mean is the employer has to find other ways to make sure that that worker is safe and that they can continue to work.
And let's take that a little bit further, because what needs to happen to make sure that the people around somebody who is not vaccinated, that they are made to feel comfortable as well?
Exactly, and that's the balancing act that I was referring to, and that I've seen employers struggling to consider everyone's feelings and thoughts on the matter, but that may mean that the employee is placed at a physical distance that makes them safe, or that they're required to wear a mask or other personal protective gear. Those are different ways that the employer could accommodate an employee who requires that sort of different setup.
These are some of the conversations that I think happened in a number of workplaces when it came to mask wearing and some of the other rules around COVID-19. And one of the elements that I heard about coming up time and time again was the issue around privacy as well. Some may argue they have the right to keep their vaccination status private. What do you make of that?
So every province has its own personal health information and privacy legislation that governs that issue, but you're absolutely right. An employee could refuse to provide their vaccine status to an employer because that's personal health information. And employers, conversely, have to have a good reason why they are collecting that information, and it has to be for a work-related purpose and because they are trying to keep their workplace and workforce safe. And so if an employer does collect that type of information, they have to keep it private and confidential. So you're absolutely right. There's a balancing act there. And again, I think we're going to see some changes in the way workplaces operate and policies around that, because it's a difficult issue.
Yeah, indeed. So any final parting advice for workplaces as they begin to draft these policies?
Absolutely. Definitely have a good communication strategy with your workforce and educate them about why the employer needs this, whatever the policies come to be, why they need it, why it's important to keep everyone safe, and make sure that the employer gets some advice and look at all the resources that are out there. Our website has resources. There's also a number of public health units and workplace advisor boards that have COVID-19 related resources. So educate yourself about that and be proactive. If you want your workforce back in the office or back in person in September, start working on this now.
One final question for you. I understand that it's key to be compliant with human rights codes. What can happen to a workplace if there's a challenge?
So if an employee was to challenge the policy or the way the employer was implementing the policy, they could make a complaint to the Human Rights Tribunal, and that could potentially go to a hearing.
Very interesting to speak with you about it this morning. Thanks for your time, Jessica.
Thanks so much for having me.
Jessica Greenwood is the lead litigator at Spring Law, which advises on workplace legal issues. How do you feel about returning to work? Are you ready to go back? Happy to stay home? Maybe some kind of happy medium? You can let us know by giving us a call, 1-866-340-1932. Email daybreaknorth@cbc.ca. Minutes now before 7 o'clock. You're listening to us in Prince Rupert, 860 AM, 91.5 FM in Prince George, and everywhere on your CBC Listen app. Early last year, residents of the Pinecrest Townhome Complex in Prince Rupert were evicted. The reason? Because of renovations to the buildings. Jennifer Quick was one of the tenants, and she moved out in October 2020.
It was next to impossible. You couldn't get anybody to help you move. You couldn't get anybody to, you couldn't go into businesses and, try and set up things so that you can, you couldn't go and look at places to even, try to rent them because nobody was allowing you in because of COVID. It was a big gong show. Like there should be actual, okay, so you want to renovate people, fine, you go through all your steps and whatever, but there should be a specific timeline in order to do the work. I mean, like when you buy a house and you get, improvements or whatever on your mortgage, you only have a year in which to complete all of your stuff. So why can't that be for when people are renovated? Because a lot of people are saying, we have the option of moving back in when they're done renovating. Well, yeah, that's great and all, but how long are you supposed to be homeless?
Jennifer Quick in Prince Rupert. Well, new rules from the residential tenancy branch are changing the way landlords can evict their tenants for renovations. It's hoped the changes will ease some of the burden for those forced to move out. Joining us this morning, Paul Legase, a poverty law advocate in Prince Rupert. Welcome back to the program, Paul.
Good morning.
What's the main change to the rules with respect to evictions for renovations?
The main change is what was called a 4-month notice that landlords would issue the tenants for renovictions. They can't issue that anymore. So previously they'd issue a 4-month notice. Usually they gave very minimal information, so it was almost impossible to even argue because you didn't know all the details. And the onus was on the tenant to respond within 30 days and file a hearing. And, a lot of vulnerable folks it's very challenging process for them. And the onus was basically on the tenant. Now the landlords can't do that. They have to apply directly to the residential tenancy branch for an order of possession and present all their evidence, particularly permits. The permits have to be in place. So someone will look at that, the tenancy branch, and that's kind of like a gatekeeper, I suppose, will probably do that. And if the permits are in place, it doesn't mean the order's issued. It's just now it can go potentially to a hearing. because it still has to go to a hearing to get the order of possession, and the tenancy branch will issue a notice to the tenant if they want to dispute it. But the landlord still has to convince the arbitrator to give them that order of possession. So it's a major shift of focus, and it's a lot of these 4-month notices that I see here locally are just mostly nonsense. Some are legitimate, but 90% of them are generally nonsense. So it's tying up a lot of tenants' time, the RTB time. And now, if it's really legitimate, then the landlord can still get it. It's just they have to do the work.
I heard calls earlier when there were some initial changes to the residential tenancy laws that tenants should have a right to move back into renovated units without paying increased rent. Has that been included in this new set of rules?
A number of advocates and activists have hoped so. A lot of tenants have. It's not, no. It can be rented out for whatever increase. So, some folks have also called that rent control is tied to a unit. That's another way of potentially dealing with it, and that is not being moved forward on at this point. But this is a significant step in the right direction, and it should curb a lot of things. Maybe it's not enough for everyone, but I think it's really good.
Well, what else would you like to see change?
I'd like to see a few things changed. They've also changed the fact that now the 12-month compensation, so there's the 2-month notice for landlord's use, and now the 4-month is gone. But if the landlord doesn't do what they say they're going to do, the tenant can now go after the landlord for 12 months rent compensation. And the new legislation also allows, puts the focus, the focus was on the tenant to prove that the landlord didn't do what they said they were going to do for compensation. And now that focus is on the landlord to prove that they did what they said. So that's a significant change. What I'd like to see arbitrators actually follow through on the focus being on the landlord, because I know it's legislated, but from my experience, even in those cases where the focus should be on the landlord, the landlord, the arbitrator will put it on the tenant. So that's kind of my major concern, that the arbitrators will follow through with the focus being on the landlord.
So what's next in terms of your position working with people who are facing that situation here in Prince Rupert?
Well, I think landlords are still going to try to say you're evicted for renovations. A lot of folks don't even get 4-month notices. Now, they don't have to be followed upon. If you get a text from your landlord and say, you got to move out, I'm renovating the place, that's always happened. I think that's still going to happen. And the big thing is a tenant just needs to know that there's no forms, there's no text, there's no anything. The landlord has to get an order of possession, and you will get a notice of hearing from the RTD. So, just for tenants to realize they don't have to respond, they don't have to react, unless they get something from the residential tenancy branch on a renovation in the hearing. They just need to not ignore it, because a lot of folks believe what their landlord tells them, and they're not necessarily going to know the change in law. So I think landlords are still going to try to do it. It's just legally under the law they can't do it. But it's now more important than ever that tenants know the rights around it, because we've been dealing with renovictions for the last number of years in BC. We keep tweaking the laws in a positive way, but landlords are still going to try to find a way. And that's not to say there is legitimate renovictions under certain circumstances. So it's not against landlords. It's just they need to play fair, and this will protect anybody, not even our most vulnerable, like our middle class folks can't even afford places here in Prince Rupert. So that's a whole other story.
Paul, good of you to join us for this part of the story. Looking forward to talking with you again.
Thank you.
Paula Gase is a poverty law advocate based in Prince Rupert. Your thoughts, you can let us know this morning, 1-866-340-1932. You can email us as well, daybreaknorth@cbc.ca, and keep that email address handy because it's time for trivia. We're in phase 3 of the provincial restart plan, and that means we can once again go to the theatre or take in a movie. As they say in the entertainment business, the show must go on. So this week we're testing your knowledge of historical theatres in BC. If you think you know the answer to this morning's question, once again, email daybreaknorth@cbc.ca. This theatre is the oldest continuously running theatre in Canada. It was built in 1913, just 3 years after the town it's located in was born. A contest was launched to name the theatre. It was eventually named in honour of a descendant of Queen Victoria. Can you tell us the name of this theatre? Email daybreaknorth@cbc.ca. While you do, here's the latest from Lorde. This is Solar Power.
I hate the winter, can't stand the cold. I tend to cancel all the plans. So sorry, I can't make it. But when the heat comes, something takes a hold. Can I kick it? Yeah, I can. My cheeks in high color, overripe peaches. No shirt, no shoes, only my features. My boy behind me, he's taking pictures. Lead the boys and girls onto the beaches. Come on, come on, tell you my secrets. I'm kinda like a prettier Jesus. Forget all of the tears that you've cried, it's over. Acid green, aquamarine. The girls are dancing in the sand, and I throw my cellular device in the water. Can you reach me? No, you can't. My cheeks in hot color, overripe peaches. No shirt, no shoes, only my features. My boy behind me, he's taking pictures. He's taking pictures. Lead the boys and girls onto the beaches. Come on, tell you my secrets. I'm kinda like a prettier Jesus. Turn it on in a new kind of bright. It's solar. Come on and let the bliss begin. Blink 3 times when you feel it kicking in. That's
Lorde and Solar Power. Today, we wanted to know the name of the oldest continuously running theatre in Canada. John Grogan in Robson Valley East knew it. It's the Patricia Theatre in Powell River. John, you and the others who knew the answer all have been entered in for the draw on Friday for that coveted Daybreak mug. Let's go right now to our Daybreak News Desk with Bill Fee.
Good morning, Carolina. Prince George could be the site of a renewable diesel plant, the first of its kind in Canada. The plant would convert natural fats like vegetable oil into a fuel source similar to petroleum diesel. Calgary-based Tidewater Midstream will bring that rezoning application to council tonight. And some good news on the fire front over the weekend. The Northwest Fire Centre says the Bulkley Lake Fire is now being held. The Regional District of Bulkley-Nechako has rescinded an evacuation order.
Thanks very much. We will be talking about wildfires in the next half hour, Bill. Wildfire season, as you well know, and as our listeners know, is here again, earlier and deadlier than in the past. But beyond focusing on how to stop fires, there are conversations about how to manage them along with our forests to be more predictable. One way is to set fires on purpose. We'll hear about doing just that after World Report at about 7:10. Outside, local smoke is in the forecast for much of the region. For Prince George, North Caribou, Robson Valley, highs to 30 with sun and smoke, up to 27 with a mix of sun and cloud for the Lakes District and Smithers. The Peace and Fort Nelson, local smoke with sun, a high of 26. And across the northwest, a cloudy day, high of 22 for the coastal inland, up to 18 with a chance of showers near the water. The Bella Coola Valley, mainly sunny with a high of 29. World Report is next. Coming up in this hour of the program, a landmark case has ended at BC Supreme Court over water diversions by Alcan on the Nechako River. We'll have the details on that still ahead. Plus, we're also going to be hearing about wildfires and suppression, renewed calls for traditional fire management. Our Belle Puri will join us with more on that conversation. Plus, we'll hear from two former Lytton residents now launching a quilt-making project to provide comfort to those who lost everything in the fire. That's all still ahead in this hour of Daybreak. Let's go first to our Daybreak News Desk with Bill Fee.
Good morning, Carolina. Officials with the Tk'emlúps te Secwépemc Nation say they'll release a detailed report after announcing recently the discovery of unmarked graves near the site of a former residential school in Kamloops. The BC Wildfire Service says more than 300 active fires are burning across BC this morning, and there are more than 24 fires of note. One fire near Penticton has grown to an estimated 5 square kilometers. It's resulted in the evacuation order for 77 properties and an evacuation alert for more than 600 others.
Thanks very much, Bill. So far this morning, not looking too smoky out there, although there is smoke in the forecast. It's sunny at the Prince George Airport, 9 degrees. In Prince Rupert, a cloudy morning at the airport, 12 degrees. In the Terrace area, partly cloudy, 14. Smithers, 10 degrees. And in the Peace, sunny and 12 this morning at the Fort St. John Airport. Fort Nelson, mostly cloudy and 13. What's it looking like for the rest of the day?
Local smoke is in the forecast for much of northern BC today. Another hot one ahead as well for Prince George, the North Caribou, and the Robson Valley. Expect highs up to 30 degrees with sun and smoke. Sun and cloud for the Lakes District and Smithers, highs around 27. In the Peace and Fort Nelson, smoke as well with sun and a high of 26. Across the northwest, there'll be a cloudy day ahead. East Lake and the coastal inland sections can expect highs of about 22. There's a chance of showers near the water, high of 18 degrees. And for the Bella Coola Valley, sunshine and a high of 29.
Hi, this is Mike McGuire, and you are listening to Daybreak on CBC Radio 1, 91.5 FM in Prince George.
Thirteen minutes now after 7 o'clock. Thanks for joining us on Daybreak this morning in Burns Lake, 99.1 FM. A landmark case has ended at BC Supreme Court over water diversions by Alcan on the Nechako River. The final arguments were heard Friday in a lawsuit launched by the Sycoos and Stellatan First Nations. The two nations allege that water diverted from the Nechako River by Alcan's Kenny Dam has negatively affected salmon and sturgeon populations in the Nechako watershed and has infringed upon Aboriginal rights. The case against Rio Tinto Alcan, BC, and Canada ran for 189 days. Sycoos Chief Priscilla Mueller is glad the case is over.
I'm feeling pretty excited. I can't believe that the day is here right now, that we're at the end of the court case. And, it took many years for us to get here. I think it was 2011 when we, launched the legal action against Rio Tinto Alcan. So it's 10 years, really, and today we're done. And I'm feeling very positive. And we still need to give an update to the community, so we're hoping in a couple of weeks we will get the community members together, because we couldn't do that because of COVID, right? So we're pretty excited. I feel really, I feel really positive. So I'm glad it's done. Well, I'm hoping that, we would be able to restore our river. I know I've said this before, I know it's not going to be restored 100%, but I really hope that we could bring the health of the river back, and I'm hoping that we will be able to have a say in how we manage the river. And, because it took, 60 years for for our river to be destroyed, and it's going to take it's going to take just as long to restore the river. So that's what we're hoping, that we'll be able to bring back, our salmon, our Chinook, and our sturgeon, which is almost extinct. So that's what we're hoping for, to have more water in the Nechako. For generations, we had a lot of camping places right in Vanderhoof, where the Royal Bank was. There was, this is where our members used to camp out all summer and fish. And now it's very difficult today to because we can't go and fish. We used to do this used to have many fish in the water, and now we have to bring or buy the salmon and ship it here, and it's really sad for me to see that. And so we depended on that river for many years, not only our community but Stilat and Notley. We every summer we were always busy fishing and preparing for winter. So
the Sycoos and Stilatin First Nations are seeking an injunction that would require Rio Tinto to reinstate the functional flows that make up the natural flow of the Nechako River. You heard there Sycoos Chief Priscilla Mueller. The timeline for the court's decision remains unknown.
Hi, you're listening to CBC Radio 1, Daybreak North on 91.5 FM in the traditional territory of Lheidli T'enneh.
And you're also listening to us in the Caribou 90.9 FM in Quesnel. Wildfire season is here again, earlier and deadlier than in the past. But beyond focusing on how to stop fires, there are conversations about how to manage them along with our forests to be more predictable. Later on the program, we're going to hear about bringing back the practice of cultural burning in BC's Caribou. But first, I'm joined by Laurie Daniels. She's a professor of forest ecology in the Faculty of Forestry at UBC, and she's been researching the topic for years. Her latest paper is focused on the history of controlled burns in the Williams Lake region, and she joins us this morning. Professor, good morning to you.
Good morning.
What is controlled burning?
So controlled burning is a management tool that we use where we use fire to fight fire, both in the short term and the long term. So controlled burns or prescribed burns would be identifying a place in the forest or in the landscape where we're going to reintroduce fire under controlled conditions. So under a set of fire weather conditions when it's cooler and wetter so that we can control the intensity and the rate of spread of the fire. And then, of course, we go in and we ignite the fire ourselves and keep it within the boundaries of the area where we want to burn, and also control then the ecological effects to gain specific goals or benefits from that fire.
And I understand, Professor, that your latest round of research focused on studying how controlled burning used to take place in the Williams Lake region. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so our research, we used tree rings to understand how fire impacted our forests in the past. And so when there are surface fires, low-intensity fires that burn under cooler and wetter conditions, we see that the fires burn through the understory and burn around the base of trees, and they can cause scars on the trees, but the trees survive. So embedded in the tree rings are scars that tell us when fires burned in the past. Our study in Williams Lake was in a Douglas fir forest, an old-growth Douglas fir forest, and we were able to reconstruct from the tree rings how frequently fires burned going back into the 1500s.
Wow, the 1500s.
1500s. So there were trees that were hundreds of years old. There were old stumps and logs that from trees that had established way back in the 1500s. And when we looked at their tree ring patterns, we discovered that the patch of forest where we were working, this old-growth Douglas fir forest, had burned on average kind of once every 15 years up until the mid to late 1800s. And so these surface fires that were burning through, some of them would have been ignited by lightning periodically, but we also think there must have been human ignitions, fire stewardship by the local indigenous people from Williams Lake, in order for fire scars to have been recurring that frequently within that patch of forest.
Were you able to measure, with that in mind, how severe the fires were?
We looked at two indicators. So first, if there's a fire scar, it means that the tree was damaged, but it survived. So that gives us strong evidence that it was a lower intensity fire. So many of the fires that we're experiencing in BC in 2017, 2018, and this year, we're seeing that those fires were much higher intensity and burned right through the crowns of the trees and spread treetop to treetop, damaging and killing trees. Well, if the scar was embedded in the tree rings, then obviously the tree had survived, and it must have been a lower intensity fire within that patch. The other thing we can look for is trees of similar ages that all established at the same time in an opening that was created by one of those higher intensity fires. So we know that forests regenerate naturally after fire. So if we look at the age of all the trees, we can look for clusters of trees of the same age that maybe came in after a fire. So we use the combination of the scars and...
Oh, I seem to have suddenly lost Professor Laurie Daniels there. Her phone just dropped. We'll try here to restore her to keep on talking about this fascinating topic around prescribed burns in the Caribou region. Well, it seems that we're not going to be able to continue our conversation with Laurie Daniels, the professor of forest ecology at UBC. Unfortunately, it seems my phones have decided that they've gone on strike. They've quit for the time being. We will be talking more, however, about controlled burning and its history. In the next half hour of our program, we're going to hear about efforts to bring back controlled cultural burning in the Caribou and some of the barriers to making that happen. In the meantime, we'd like to turn it to you, your thoughts on controlled burns and the history of it in the province, particularly here in northern BC. Do you think it's a viable answer to the wildfires that we've contended with over the last several years? Let us know your thoughts. 1-866-340-1932.
Hi, my name is Jessica Friesen on behalf of Cops for Cancer. This year, the Tour de North is pedaling approximately 900 kilometers from Prince George to Prince Rupert to raise awareness and fundraise for pediatric cancer research and pediatric support. These funds go towards research development, treatment, and also sending kids battling cancer to Camp Good Times, where they can have a safe camp experience like any other kid. Now more than ever, these kids need our help. If this is something you wish to support, you can go to support.cancer.ca and click donate. There you will be able to look up me, Jessica Friesen, or any other of the 5 Rupert riders as a participant and donate directly to our pages. Again, that's Jessica Friesen, spelled F-R-I-E-S-E-N. Thank you so much for your support.
Thanks very much. 25 minutes now after 7 o'clock. Once again, if you have a public service announcement, give us a call, 1-866-340-1932. Time for some music now on Daybreak. It's been a long time since we gathered and listened to live music outdoors. Feels like forever. Many northern BC festivals were unable to continue as usual again this year because of uncertain provincial restrictions, but the Bella Coola Music Festival will be going ahead July 17th and 18th in just a few days. Here's one of the headliners. This is Blackberry Wood with The Strong Man.
1, 2, 3.
Side by side with the famous Buffalo Bill, through the wild prairies, past the trees upon Black Hill, traveling with the circus and all its thrills and spills, scaring all the town folk, using all the chills, fights 1,000 wrestlers in a giant circus tent, and a piece of iron they say can't be banned, picks up big fat ladies and bounces them on his head, fights the Russian bears till they pretend to be dead, pretend to be dead. Pretend to be dead, oh
Well, I bet you're awake now. That is Blackberry Wood with The Strong Man, one of the bands set to play the Bella Coola Music Festival. That's a festival that will be happening in person July 17th and July 18th. We'll have more local music for you from that festival on tomorrow's program. We're coming up to the 7:30 Daybreak News in the next half hour of the program, trying to provide comfort to those who lost everything in the Lytton fire. We'll hear from two former residents launching a quilt making project for their home community, and we'll talk about attempts to bring back cultural burning to help prevent deadly wildfires in central BC. That's all coming up after your Daybreak News.
This is CBC News from Prince George. It is 9 degrees in Prince George, 12 in Prince Rupert, and 12 degrees in Fort St. John. Good morning, I'm Bill Fee. There are now 306 fires burning in the province, nearly 100 more than this time last week. The majority of the fires are in the Kamloops Fire Centre. There are 25 fires of note right now, with 35 new fire starts over the past 2 days. Evacuation orders and alerts are in place for thousands of properties. Some good news on the wildfire front of the weekend. The Northwest Fire Centre says the Bulkley Fire is now being held. The Regional District of Bulkley-Nechako and the Wet'suwet'en Band Council have been able to rescind an evacuation order related to the Bulkley Lake Fire. An evacuation alert, though, does remain in place. The Regional District of Bulkley-Nechako has also issued 2 more evacuation alerts due to the wildfire situation. The Camsell Lake Fire is burning west of Stewart Lake. It's a small fire right now at 20 hectares, but a number of Yekooche and Claston Reserve communities are impacted by that alert. And the Grizzly Lake Fire southwest of Vanderhoof is estimated at 500 hectares. Both blazes are listed at out of control. Evacuation alerts were issued yesterday for more communities, including Sun Peaks and Canham Lake. Anxiety levels are high for many people who live in the regions where there are high risk of wildfires. They're often ready to pack and go at a moment's notice. Margot Wagner, the chief of the Caribou Regional District, says it does take a toll.
It is stressful. You know, we still have a lot of mental health issues left over from 2017. And every time there's this little spiral of smoke that comes up from a lightning hit, it's a trigger for some people, and they do get concerned.
For the latest information on wildfires, you can go to the BC Wildfire Service website. First Nations and forestry specialists say prescribed burning and cultural burning would help reduce the frequency of mega wildfires in this province. The controlled burns are designed to reduce fuel accumulated on forest floors and generate new growth. John Gilchrist of the Salish Firekeepers Society says there are ways to mitigate fire instead of always working to suppress it.
Well, for the summer, that's pretty much all that you can do is attack it in the springtime and the fall time. There is work that's done and also needs more of it done is fuel management work. That's getting rid of forest fuels so that when a fire does happen in the summer, there's controllable spaces around the communities.
The Provincial Ministry of Forests says it supports traditional prescribed burning techniques. Indigenous people, though, say red tape, technical demands, and jurisdictional issues are common barriers that make getting approval for cultural burns nearly impossible. Councillors with the Kamloops First Nation are raising concern about the fire risks along CN tracks through banned land north of Kamloops. Jeanette Jules is a band councillor. Jules says there's 12 kilometres of track that runs through the reserve that's not being maintained. She says the long weeds along the track are a major fire risk.
We want them to maintain the right-of-way, to clear the right-of-way so that there is no fire hazard. We know what it's like. A lot of the people who live in the subdivision already know what it's like to have a fire. We had a fire in July of 2010.
She says getting residents out of the area if a fire sparks is a challenge she doesn't want to face once again. She says CN told them after the 2010 fire they would work with the band to keep the weeds down, but says that hasn't happened to the band's liking. If the company doesn't clear up the tracks, Jules says the band will take its fire concerns to Transport Canada. Valemount residents are struggling to keep their pantries stocked. Reports of empty shelves and rancid meats at the only grocery store in town have forced some to travel long distances for food. Valemount resident Shaylin Carlson says the only grocery store in the town has been having supply issues for months. Others report feeling the meat in the coolers at room temperature and finding bare shelves when they go to shop. Residents Meg Aspie and Steph McDonald are concerned that those that don't have a means of transportation won't be able to accumulate groceries.
Driving 45 minutes is a minor inconvenience, but there are many members of our community that don't have that ability.
Valemount's Mayor Owen Torgerson says council is aware of the situation and is trying to find a solution. CBC has contacted the IGA store manager, who would only confirm the store has closed and could not provide a reopening date. Prince George could become the site of a renewable diesel plant, the first of its kind in Canada. The plant would convert natural fats like vegetable oil and grease to a fuel source similar to diesel. A rezoning proposal by Calgary-based Tidewater Midstream is being read at tonight's City Council meeting in Prince George. The proposal would allow construction of an existing industrial site at their Prince George refinery. The company says it would be a minimal increase in emissions. It is 7:35. That is the CBC News.
Thanks very much, Bill Fee at our Daybreak News Desk. I'm Carolina DeReich. Coming up in this half hour of the program, they provided comfort blankets for victims of the 2017 wildfires in Ashcroft and Boston Flats. Now, an informal group in Kamloops is rallying to do it again for Lytton. We're going to head to the sewing studio in about 10 minutes' time. Before that, though, we're going to hear from some people in central BC trying to bring back the practice of cultural burning as a way to prevent more devastating wildfires. So that's all ahead in this half hour. Plus, on the playlist, the best of the backup. We're putting backup singers into the spotlight. You can make your song pick by giving us a call, 1-866-340-1932. First, though, let's find out how things are looking on the roads, highways, and byways with Bill Fee.
Not too bad out there today. I would watch for wildfire smoke if you're traveling along the Highway 16 corridor, as well if you're traveling around the northeast. Expect some local smoky conditions as well. Nothing major to tell you about. Highway 29 will be closed in both directions from about 10 until noon today. There's a vehicle recovery taking place between Watson Road and Donnis Road in the Charlie Lake area. Wildfire activity has closed access to Mugman Provincial Park south of Tumbler Ridge. On the marine report, winds will be light to 15 knots, seas to 2 meters today. No BC ferries delays to tell you about this morning. And for hydro, no major outages in northern BC right now.
So far this morning at the Prince George Airport, sunny and 9. Quesnel, 11 degrees. Prince Rupert at the airport, cloudy and 12. It's 12 degrees as well on Haida Gwaii and Sandspit. Mostly cloudy and 11 in Masset. The Central Coast, cloudy, 12 degrees. Bella Coola, mainly sunny and 13. At the airport between Terrace and Kitimat, partly cloudy, 14 degrees. Stewart, a mostly cloudy morning and 12. And as we move east through the Bulkley Valley and the Lakes District, Smithers 10, Burns Lake 7, and in Fort St. James 11 degrees right now. Mackenzie also 11 degrees at this hour. And across the piece, sun at the Fort St. John Airport 12 degrees. Sunny and 11 in Dawson Creek. Chetwynd mostly cloudy 13. Fort Nelson mostly cloudy 13 degrees as well. And in Dease Lake partly cloudy, right now sitting at 9 degrees. It's coming up to 22 minutes now before 8 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. Thanks for joining us this Monday morning. Wildfires continue to burn in several parts of the province this morning, and over the past 4 years, particularly 2017 and 2018, millions of hectares of forest burned across BC. Wildfires have become frequent and intense. As the province navigates through yet another season of fire, there are renewed calls for traditional fire management techniques, including prescribed burning and cultural burning. CBC Impact Team reporter Belle Puri joins me to take a look at the objectives and obstacles when it comes to fighting fire with fire. Belle, good morning.
Good morning, Carolina.
Let's start with the objectives. What's the aim of prescribed burning compared to how we actually fight fires?
Well, what we do now is basically fire suppression. A fire breaks out in the summer and crews work to extinguish it. Prescribed burning or cultural burning, it aims to reduce the fuel load in the forest before that wildfire breaks out. It gets rid of what's on the ground through a controlled low-intensity fire. Now, cultural burns do the same, but they're considered a sacred Indigenous practice. So essentially, they set fire to a buildup of fuel on the forest fire, so there's less to catch fire in the summertime. Now, this type of work happens in spring and fall. There's a small window of opportunity. The conditions have to be just right. Weather can get in the way. Controlled burning like this, though, is not a new concept. It's centuries old, practiced by Indigenous peoples for thousands of years until colonization. The Interior Salish Firekeeper Society is a newly formed organization that wants to bring back Indigenous cultural burning. Joe Gilchrist is a member of that group, and we talked to him just outside of Merritt about the impact of no or very little prescribed burning over the past 100 years.
It's really unhealthy, not only just for the forest, but even for sage and grass. The grass gets really clumpy. The sage gets overaged. It shouldn't be as thick as it is. It should be more grassland with sage in it. But now you'll see in the grassland areas and sage areas that it's overgrown. It just makes the fuel loading a lot higher and a lot harder to fight fire.
When it's done right, prescribed burning or cultural burning burns what's on the ground, but not what's underneath. So the roots stay intact, and that's a vital element to enhance new growth. So sort of good fire versus bad fire, what you want to do is just reduce the need for direct fire suppression and recreate the natural process.
And this is where the obstacles come in. Belle, why is this not happening in BC?
It is happening, but on a very small scale. I've been using the terms, interchangeably, prescribed and cultural burning, but the main difference is that cultural burning is done by Indigenous peoples on Indigenous lands. And in recent years, there have been partnerships with government to have this happen and pilot projects. Right now, the Yunsitine First Nation is negotiating for a pilot project just outside of Williams Lake. And Russell Myers-Ross is a former chief. He now leads that community's fire management program. And he says there are definitely bureaucratic barriers to cultural burning.
It's incredibly technical to put together plans to do prescribed burning, even though it's as simple as having a match, really. And you don't need that much more. You almost have to develop a burn plan. And then when you develop a burn plan, you need to put it into the referral process. And it has to go through 5 different signatures through the provincial bureaucracy before you get approval and permit.
So, a rigorous approval process that includes tight timelines, overlapping jurisdictions, as well as the high cost of, what government demands in terms of technology and personnel. And there is a focus on Western science, which is pretty much a culture of suppression, which is what we have in place right now. Amy Cardinal Christensen is a fire research scientist with the Canadian Fire Service, and she's worked with almost 24 First Nations in BC on this topic, and she is Indigenous herself.
With cultural burning, what's really important is just paying attention to your local conditions around you and then putting fire on the ground at the right time. So sometimes there's a real disconnect between that practice and then kind of an agency approved practice. So yeah, I think that there's also a real lack of understanding about what cultural burning actually is, how it's conducted, the techniques that are used, and when it's done.
Of course, we put these issues and concerns to the BC government. The Minister of Forests, we were told, wasn't available for an interview, but a spokesperson for the ministry told us that the provincial government does support cultural burning and that it has assisted many First Nations across the province in this practice. But the response didn't address any of the barriers or the bureaucracy that can take up to a year just to get approval for a burn.
So a technique that worked 100 years ago and before. But Belle, what do we know about how it has worked elsewhere in more recent times?
It's worked well in New Zealand. Australia also has an indigenously led cultural burning program. In fact, experts from Australia have come to British Columbia in recent years to help First Nations put together some cultural burning programs here. California, lots of examples of prescribed burning there. It's less than half the size of BC with far less forests, but has 3 times the amount of prescribed burning. The state of New Jersey also uses it to control invasive plant species and, of course, to reduce the hazardous accumulations of forest fuels. Kira Hoffman is a postdoctoral researcher at UBC's Faculty of Forestry.
The risk of prescribed fire is very, very low. And then there's been a lot of studies out showing that fire escape, the probability of fires getting out of control from prescribed burning is very, very low. And so the risk of having, a catastrophic fire in peak fire season, so when it's really dry and hot, is much higher.
And like everyone else, Hoffman is sounding the alarm that something has to be done to stop this cycle of mega fires that we've been in the last few years. And she says, with climate change, its interaction with wildfire, the heat waves, the dry conditions, not the usual amount of rain that we get in June, all this fuel that's on the forest floor, they're all contributing factors to what she calls a new fire reality that's here now. And as far as she can understand, it's not going to get any better. And we certainly are living that reality right now in northern BC. So, Belle, given the hurdles and bureaucracy, what's the status of the Yunsatin First Nations attempt to set up a pilot project for cultural burning? It's still in the works, but as we heard, former Chief Russell Myers-Ross say, all you need is a match. But the government, he says, you need heavy equipment, big hoses, high-priced personnel, things that cost a lot of money. And he sees that as needlessly complicating the process. The government, he says, needs to trust Indigenous peoples and allow them stewardship over the land.
My future goal is not just centered around just protection and fire suppression. It's more about bringing about cultural revitalization to the landscape and looking at our forests that are devastated and being able to sort of regenerate them and going way beyond the boundaries of just looking at our communities that need to be protected. So I think that's mostly where the funding is right now. That's sort of the difference in priorities, I think.
So, there is increasing interest in prescribed burns, but First Nations and researchers say policymakers just aren't moving fast enough. In 2018, there was a report to stakeholders, including government, and it actually and cultural burns. But since that report, not much has happened. And in the meantime, wildfire seasons in British Columbia seem to be starting earlier and lasting longer. Belle Puri, thank you very much for bringing us this story today. Have a good day. You as well. Belle Puri, a reporter with the CBC Vancouver Impact Team. And you can see more of this story tonight on CBC News Vancouver. That's at 6 o'clock on television. And read more online, cbc.ca/BC.
This is Carson Gray, a singer, songwriter, and performer from Skidegate, Haida Gwaii. You're listening to Daybreak in Skidegate at 104.9 FM and everywhere on your CBC Listen app. Minutes now before 8 o'clock. They helped out during the 2017 wildfires and are now back at it again. But this time the wildfires hit much closer to home. Verna and Jack Miller grew up in Lytton and watched in horror as most of their home community burnt down. Now they're once again mobilizing to create comfort blankets for victims of the fire. Daybreak's Doug Herbert met up with them in Kamloops.
This is my disaster area. I've been trying to put together over there various kits. We've got a lot of panels that we're going to make quick quilts with, especially for kids. This is my pile of mainly plaids things. So I've got at least 2, maybe 3 quilts there ready to go, but I just have to organize them into some kind of pattern. My name is Bipetla. I'm from the Nhlaka'pamux Nation. My English name is Verna Miller.
My name is Jack Miller, and I grew up in Lytton.
Verna, what are you intending to do for the people of Lytton?
I was a member of the St. George's Residential School student body, if I could put it delicately. And I know a lot of the families, and I actually have relatives in Lytton that lost their homes. So our little group called the Nhlaka'pamux Fiber Arts Council, extremely informal. We've done this before. We made comfort quilts. Now, when you think of quilts, you think, oh, that stuff is going to be hot. But as one of my associates said, it doesn't matter. You could use it to sit on the floor, just wrap it around when you're feeling really awful. But mainly they're comfort quilts. And when Ashcroft area had their big fire, the reserve lost over a dozen homes. The trailer park at Boston Flats, they lost their homes, and a few other people around lost their homes. And between, I think there was 3 of us at the time, maybe 4, we managed to cobble together almost 200 quilts. Some were donations, people had unfinished objects that we finished, and we were like a sweatshop. 2 days a week we would gather together at the band multi-purpose room, and we'd just sew our brains out, and then gradually we'd put them together, and then we'd pile them up, and then our band decided that it would be a really neat idea if we had a little mini feast, and we had it in Ashcroft, and every person who was victimized by the fire got one of our quilts. There was 2 special ones. One was like a wall hanging made with a silhouette of the firemen, with all the oranges and reds and yellows in the background showing the firemen fighting the fire. And that went to the Ashcroft Fire Department. The other special one was made for an elder from the Ashcroft band who lost everything. He's an old cowboy, and I made him a very special quilt that was cowboy and indigenous themed. And he was, I guess, overwhelmed, but everybody was very grateful. I think they were quite overwhelmed by the fact that we took the time to do this. It just makes you feel good that you're going to bring comfort somehow to someone.
What was it like for you to see Lytton burning? I know it was almost in real time for some people.
Yeah, it was horrifying. We're so devastated. We both went to school there. Jack lived there, and actually the house that he lived in is where my sister was living, and it's gone. And having gone to residential school outside of Lytton, of course we met in high school, went to school there, had many friends, relatives, some places of memory, all those things that took place.
Now, Jack, I have to ask you, what was it like for you to watch your hometown go up in flames?
Oh, it was mind-numbing because it happened so quickly. The first photos that we saw, the whole town was black, and the house that I lived in virtually all my young life was below the Trans-Canada Highway and above the CPR. So the whole place burnt down, but along with many other people who lost their homes. But that my dad built that house in 1947, and so that was kind of special to me.
So this act of creating comfort blankets is sort of a way for you both to try to, I guess, get some good out of this terrible situation?
Yeah, because I'm really feeling quite helpless. I mean, we've tried to do a little bit by the multitude of donations we've collected just within Sienna Ridge, but I'm feeling like I'm getting double whammy here, because when the disclosures were made of the 215 bodies that were found, I just got numb. I couldn't think. I was barely functioning, because even though it wasn't a direct issue, because I went to St. George's Residential School outside of Lytton, but it started to bring back all these memories of the story of one body that was buried on a knoll outside of the residential school, but I was too young to understand the consequences of that. But St. George's is where the first disclosures of sexual abuse of the little boys was made. And I mean, all those things start to well up, and you don't know what to do with yourself.
And then you throw in a big wildfire.
Well, that on top of it, and then our neighbor across the street is still trying to find his friend, and all these things keep piling up, and I'm thinking, I got to stay busy, I got to do something.
Verna and Jack Miller in Kamloops. Not an easy thing to keep busy, but they're doing so by creating comfort blankets for fire victims in Lytton. Thanks to Daybreak's Doug Herbert for bringing us that story.
6 minutes now before 8 o'clock, and that means it's time for the playlist. This is where we pick a theme and you pick the song that somehow matches. We're keeping backup singers in the spotlight this week. We want to play your favorite songs featuring great background vocalists. We got an email from Anita Reed who writes, best backup vocal songs for me is the Eurythmics, Would I Lie to You? A great song to get moving in the morning. Well, Anita, this is actually a trick backup vocal song because it's all one person's voice. It's all Annie Lennox doing both the front vocals and the backup vocals. Let's take a listen. This is the Eurythmics, Would I Lie to You, submitted for the great backing vocals. The trick here, though, it's all Annie Lennox, just track after track of her voice layered over one another. So if you have a song featuring great backing vocals, give us a call, 1-866-340-1932. We'll get it on. We're putting backup vocalists into the spotlight this week. You can also email us, daybreaknorth@cbc.ca. Let's go now to our Daybreak News Desk with Bill Fee.
Good morning, Carolina. It's taken 3 years, but Mackenzie now has a safe emergency evacuation route in the event of a wildfire. The Forest Enhancement Society says treatment to reduce flammable woody debris along Highway 39, the only way in and out of Mackenzie, is now complete. And police in Nanaimo are calling it disturbing and reprehensible. They say a homeless man was run over with a car and pepper sprayed Saturday night.
Thanks very much, Bill. We'll be looking for more details on all of those stories and more in the next half hour after World Report.
Do you find summer comes with a certain amount of anxiety now? Worries about wildfires and floods are becoming more common. We're going to be hearing about how you can help manage that stress at about 8:10. Plus, we'll talk about the resurgence of roller skating right here on CBC Radio 1. This is Daybreak. I'm Carolina DeReich. World Report is coming your way at 8 o'clock. From jam skating to roller derby, roller skating has a long history of both community building and activism. Now, with the pandemic fueling a renewed interest in the sport, the community has moved online to platforms like Instagram and TikTok. We're going to meet a roller skater in Prince George working to ensure diverse body types are represented. That's coming up at 20 after 8. But first, people who live through wildfires are experiencing sleepless nights during this dry and hot spell. We'll hear more about how to manage those feelings in just a few moments. But first, let's go to our Daybreak News Desk with Bill Fee.
Good morning, Carolina. Rail companies, CP and CN, now have new regulations to follow to help reduce the risk of wildfires. The Federal Transport Minister, Omar Alghabra, says the Canadian National and Canadian Pacific must ensure a 60-minute response time to any fires detected along lines running through Lytton. And authorities are reminding people not to fly drones near wildfires. Yesterday, aircraft assisting with 2 wildfires were temporarily grounded because drones were encroaching on their area of operations.
Thanks, Bill. So far this morning, sunny at the Prince George Airport and 13 degrees in Prince Rupert. It's a partly cloudy morning, 13 degrees at the airport. Terrace, mostly cloudy and 15 degrees. And in the Peace, mainly sunny, 15 degrees as well. How's the rest of the day looking, Bill?
Expect to see some local smoke in the forecast for much of northern BC today, otherwise very hot. Across Prince George, the North Caribou and the Robson Valley, highs will reach 30 degrees with sun and smoke. Sun and cloud expected for the Lakes District and Smithers, highs of around 27 degrees. For the Peace and Fort Nelson, local smoke as well with sun and high of 26. For the Northwest, clouds. Dease Lake and coastal inland sections will see highs to 22. There is a chance of showers near the water with a high of 18 degrees. And for the Bella Coola Valley, mainly sunny and highs of 29.
Coming up to 8:13, when wildfires started burning near Burns Lake this year, Charlie Rensby couldn't sleep. The village councillor helped lead the wildfire response in his community in 2018 as acting mayor and in his role helping deliver supplies to people on the front lines of the wildfire fight. Now he says the onset of summer comes with a certain amount of anxiety. Here he is speaking with the CBC's Andrew Curiata.
It's very easy to think back about what went on in 2018 and have apprehension and quite a bit of anxiety about what could possibly happen this year. And I mean, that's completely normal. It was a really tough time for a lot of us. Some of us, we lost personal belongings to the fire, animals, land, a lot of us lost a lot. And it was a very traumatic experience for the entire community because whether you were losing it or not, you were put at risk or you knew someone who was, and it was a very personal experience for everyone. And I think like I said, it's just natural that when something starts happening again, that you immediately revert back to the last time that happened, the last time we went through these motions, and it just sends up red flags in your brain. Oh God, I hope this doesn't happen. Oh my, I hope this doesn't happen. And it just builds a level of anxiety, and that's all natural. That's 100% natural that people feel that way. That's our survival instinct telling us things could potentially get wrong here and we need to pay attention. But it's important that we try and control that anxiety and we don't let it run our lives either.
Do you find that it's changed the way you feel when summer starts to come and the warm weather and the sun starts to shine more and stuff like that?